Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Hey in Yevmot. As we say, good morning and Chodesh Tov. Learn for a four shlema for Yosef Asriel ben Chaim Michal and Elazar ben Ruma, and for Eli Neshama of
Yitzchak Tzvi ben Chaim Betzalel.
Yitzchak Tzvi ben Chaim Betzalel, and for my great grandfather David ben Pesach Schreibman. So we got down on the Pei to about the 7th, 8th line. Rav Papa, Rav Shapiro, Iklu Lehinsavu, or the gear says the Shechnitzav. That we find Shechnitzavo, we find elsewhere that place. These rabbis came to that place. They came to the place, the town of Avida Baravan, I guess, in that area. They asked them the following question: Who's the question we raised yesterday? Are women who are fit to marry a Kohen, are they forbidden from marrying a person who's possible like a halal? We know that a Kohen cannot marry a halala, a woman who's been defiled by somebody that she wasn't supposed to be married to. So a Kohen cannot marry a halala, but what about a halal? Can a regular woman who's fit to marry a Kohen, whether she's a Bas Kohen or a Yisraelis, or she's fit to marry a Kohen, is she forbidden to marrying a halal? Ksheris, women who are kosher, are they forbidden to marry somebody who's possible? Oh, lo. Amalu Rav Papa. So Rav Papa said, Tanisua, let's look at the famous Mishnah, the beginning of the last parak in Kedushin. Asar Yosem Bavel. When they came up from Babel, the 42,000 and change Jews, the few who showed up in Israel from Babel, among them were different kinds of lineages. For example, we have Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, right? They were coming from Yisraelim, Chalalim. Chalalim, we know, are Kohanim who married the offspring of a bad union between a Kohen and somebody who wasn't supposed to marry, like a Kohen who married a Grusha, Chalala, Zona, child is a Halal. That's one of the kinds of lineages that came up there, that came to Eretz Israel, regular Kohanim in Israel, and Chalalim, Gerim, converts, Charurim, freed slaves, Mamzerim, Nesinim, whose conversion was not really valid. Shtuki Basubi, these are questionable. We don't know who the parents are. So in all these cases, what's the rule? So the Mishnah says up there, Israel can intermarry with one another, like we do today. As long as you're not a Kohen, you can marry a Halal, you can marry a Ger, you can marry a freed slave. They're allowed to marry one another. Geire, Charuri, Mamzer, these who are not really part of Kahal Yisrael, right? Kahal, or freed slaves, Mamzer, Nesinu Shtuka Vasufe, all those Mutam, because they're all not considered the Kahal. It doesn't say that a Kahanas can marry a Chalal. It says Kahana can only marry with Leviim Yisrael. It doesn't say marrying a Chalal. Mashma that a Kahanas, a qualified Jewish woman who's a Bas Kohen, who's fit to marry a Kohen, cannot marry a Chalal because it doesn't mention that. So that's a proof that they cannot, contrary to what we learned yesterday. No. If the women can marry the equivalent men and the men can marry the equivalent women, then in other words, Kohanim Yisrael can all intermarry with one another, regardless of male and female. Kohanim males can marry Yisrael females and vice versa. But in the case of Kohen, keep the ilu boy mitzvah chalal asur. But in the case of a Kohen, we know that a Kohen cannot marry a chalal. The pasuk says, since the Kohen can't marry halal, so lo ktani, we didn't mention it, even though really a Bas Kohen could marry a halal, but since a Kohen cannot marry a halal, it's not mentioned. In other words, the ones in the Mishnah only mention where it goes both ways. The men can, if the men have this disability or this qualification or this lineage, they can marry women of a similar lineage and vice versa. But in the case of the Kohen cannot marry the halalah. That's why it's not mentioned that the halal can marry a Bas Kohen, even though he actually could. So therefore, it's no proof from there. That's what he answered them, right? Rav Meir Shapiro answered him. He says, you can't prove anything from there. Then, keeping the above mitzvah halal, therefore, it's not mentioned. A Kohen can't marry a halal, but indeed a halal could possibly marry a Bas Kohen. Also, they came before Avida Baravan because we said it was his town. Who he said, Dardaki children. We had in yesterday's Gemara says, Ksheris, women who are kosher to marry Kohen, like a Bas Kohen, they are not forbidden from marrying a halal, somebody who is a puzzle Kohen. And that's how we come out, and that's how we hold. She is with a very sofrim. right? So there's no prohibition. However, where is it forbidden? As we saw yesterday, if it's forbidden in the Torah for a Kohen to marry a Grusha, it's also forbidden for the Grusha to marry a Kohen. And just like a Kohen Gadol cannot marry an Amana, it's forbidden the Yisra's on her too. As we saw from Yudah Marav's halacha, so he said, even if that only applies to all Jews, not just to Kohanim, but we said from we learn out that double lashon to teach me that when a Kohen is prohibited from marrying a person like a Halala or a Zona or a Grusha, she's also forbidden to marry him. However, that doesn't work in the case of a Kohen, a Kohen who can't marry a Halala. In that case, the Kohen can't marry the Halala, and she's forbidden to marry him too. But a Kohen who's a Kohen who's a Halal could marry a Bas Kohen. There's no forbidden. It's not forbidden either way over there. Whereas when something is forbidden for a man to do, whatever is forbidden for him to do, whether it's eating treif, observing Shabbos, or marrying a kind of person, it's the equivalent is forbidden for her too. She can't eat treif, she has to keep Shabbos, and she can't marry him. The Grusha can't marry him. However, in the case of the Halal, he could marry a Bas Kohen. Right? Shnias B'divrei Sofrim. So we said in the Mishnah that Shnias B'divrei Sofrim, what's the halacha over there? Shnias B'divrei Sofrim, meaning, let's say Reuven cannot marry his grandmother, right? And let's say he did over an Isser Drabanan, but his brother, when he dies with no children, his brother Shimon, it's not his grandmother. He has a different grandmother on his mother's side. So therefore, it's not usher him. So what's the halacha there? So he said that's the case also where it's mutter to one and usher to the other, or vice versa, whoever's grandmother it was. However, we did say in the Mishnah, there was another point that the Ksuba said in the Mishnah that in these cases of Shnias B'divrei Sofrim, they're not entitled to the Ksuba. Even though a Kohen who marries a Grusha is not supposed to, the Kedushin's Chal, she gets the Ksuba. That's pretty strange, isn't it? When you're over an Isser in the Torah, she gets the Ksuba. She's entitled to Ksuba. When you're over an Isser Rabbanan, you don't get the Ksuba. What's going on over here? So the Gemara is now going to describe that. One minute, B'nai Biri, the people from Biri asked Rav Shapiro the question. Shni l'baal v'lo shni l'yavam. Let's say she's forbidden as a secondary Isser. Let's say she's the grandmother of Reuven, but not the grandmother of Shimon. So she's Shnia to the husband, to Reuven, but not to Shimon. Does she have a ksuba from the Mishnah says she doesn't get a ksuba, so she doesn't have a ksuba from Reuven because we want her to leave the marriage. We want her to stop being married to your grandmother. It isn't nice. So in order to encourage her, we say, you're not going to get any ksuba. You might as well leave right now. So what about, is she entitled to the ksuba from the yavam who is not a shnia to her, not a shnia to this grandmother? Since the ksuba comes from the nechas and the assets of the first husband, that's Reuben, less plus, she's not entitled because she's not entitled, even though Shimon, the brother, is not forbidden to marry her, but would she get the ksuba from? Since the ksuba is supposed to come from Reuben, and Reuben doesn't give her ksuba in this case because it's his grandmother, so she doesn't get the ksuba. Since if, let's say, the first brother Reuben left no assets, Tekil Rabbanan Mishain, the Rabbanan said, well, the second guy Yavam, even though he didn't make the deal with her originally, she sort of fell into his lap, right? So to speak, she fell into his lap. He should still give her ksuba. Shelo tei kalabein of lotzia. What's the reason for ksuba? If you learn it's Rabbanan, or if you want to explain the reason for the Torah, but the basic reason of ksuba is he should think twice before divorcing her. So here too, if a Reuben died with no children and he left zero assets, now she falls to Shimon. So Shimon should give her a ksuba so that she'll show talk about it. So do you say in here also that she would get the ksuba from Shimon, who she's not a shnia to? Islam, maybe she would have the ksuba. The ksuba comes from the first husband. The emaisa shnia labal. If she was a shnia, if she was like the grandmother or the son's daughter-in-law, whatever, a secondary relationship to the husband, she's not even doesn't get from the yavam, because since the original marriage was no good, was not sanctioned by the rabbis, she's not entitled to ksuba at all. She shouldn't have married the guy. She's not entitled to yavam. So that's the answer. The answer is she doesn't get any ksuba in that case at all. In a regular case, Reuben married a nice girl. Everybody liked the marriage. It was kosher and yasher. But he died with no children and no money. and she fell to Shimon. So Shimon, the rabbi said you should have a ksuba there too. But in this case, where she wasn't supposed to marry Reuben because it was Reuben's grandmother, no ksuba at all. Says the Gemara, okay, fine, we understand that. You just said there that the ksuba is from the first husband, not from the second husband. You say over here, if she was a shnia to the husband, she doesn't even get from the oven. Mashma, there is a ksuba from the oven, like we've learned before. The answer is yes, there is. So normally the ksuba for Yibam comes from the chas and the assets of the first husband. Be less than a rishon, but if he didn't leave anything over, he doesn't have anything to give him a sheni, then the second husband should give. However, if the first marriage was no good because he married his grandmother, somebody he wasn't supposed to marry, then the Yavam gives her no ksuba at all. Meaning, even if the first husband had assets, she doesn't get any ksuba. That's the idea. She should have left the marriage.
The ksuba for the second husband, because it has to be equivalent to the
no, minimal. There wasn't whatever the first guy wrote. You mean? No, presumably it's only the minimal, the 200 shekels. It's only the minimal one. But in this case, where she wasn't supposed to marry Reuven, even if there was money, even if Reuven had money, he doesn't have to give her any ksuba. No ksuba at all. She's not entitled. The rabbis voided it. And even if she wasn't forbidden to marry Shimon because she wasn't his relative, she wasn't his grandmother, but since she came to Shimon only from a forbidden marriage, she's not entitled to anything. What about the Yisurim in the Torah? Cannot marry Kohen Gadol, even though we throw in chalutz over here, we'll come back to this. Chalutz is really only drabanan, but we always mention grusha and chalutza together. The rabbis from Mataka and chalutza is also forbidden to marry a Kohen, just like a grusha. Because if they were matzah chalutza, they'll come to matzah grusha also. It's all drabanan. But basically, the Yisurim we're talking about are the rice. So we seem to indicate in the Mishnah she's entitled to the ksuba, even though it's a forbidden marriage. The rabbi said a Kohen should marry grusha. We know today in Israel, the rabbanut will not allow a Kohen to marry grusha. Some do without the rabbanut. Right? You get 2 Adam, it's you can marry a Kohen, can marry grusha. Okay, you're not supposed to. The kids will be chalalim. And if you do, she's entitled to the ksubas. We seem to say in the Mishnah. Well, is she entitled to mazonos? Is she entitled to sustenance? Does he have to give her, feed her? What's the case? If she's living with him right now, why would we tell her to feed her? She's supposed to, we want to encourage them to get divorced. So you and I are going to say, give her food? Don't give her food. We're talking about a case where she needs his income. Today, many cases, even in the Gemara, she had more income than him. She says, keep your money and leave me out of this, I'll feed myself. But when she needs the food, why would we encourage them to stay together? We're trying to get them to get divorced. He's not supposed to say married to her. So if he's married to him, of course we're trying to Mazonas Isla. We're trying to get them to divorce. Why would we tell him to feed her? Just the opposite. Don't feed her, let her out. Here's the case. He married a Grusha and he went overseas and she had no food. So she borrowed money from people with the understanding that the husband will pay him back. And she ate from that money. My mizona to my ksuba. Do you say that mizono is a condition of the ksuba? Mid-Islam, since she's entitled to a ksuba, Islam mizona, she's entitled to mizonos too, because the marriage is valid at the end of the day, even though it's forbidden, it's valid. Since she has ksuba, she's entitled to mizonos too, and the husband has to pay back for that mizonos. Oduma, ksuba do mishko mepik Islam. The ksuba we give her because she's entitled to ksuba minat Torah, let's say, and the ksuba is also made, he pays off the ksuba and she leaves. Mizone, but the mizonos, by saying you're giving mizonos, that's encouraging him to stay. The ksuba is not necessarily encouraging him to stay. The ksuba can say, listen, pay her off and get her out. Giving her mizonos and saying feed her all the time, that's like encouraging him to stay. So maybe she hasn't told that. Amalei Lesla. So he answered him. That was the question that was raised. Rav Lezer asked the question of Yochanan, is she entitled to mizonos or not? And the answer is, she's not entitled to mizonos. Too bad. And whoever lent her the money, if she can't pay it back, he's out the money. Lesser, she's not entitled to mizonos. I have a tiny bit another brisa yeshla. Another brisa says that she isn't entitled to mizonos. What happens if he didn't make it back from his trip? When he didn't make it back from his trip, so now there's no concern about trying to get them apart. Trying to push them apart and trying to get them divorced because he didn't make it back anyway. He's dead. So after he died, she was married to him, right? She's entitled to her ksuba. She's entitled to mizonos too until she gets married or until the ksuba is all paid out and there's no money left, she's entitled to from mazonos, because just like it's a Tanai ksuba, she's entitled to ksuba, she's entitled to mazonos. We don't want to give her mazonos in a case where they're still married because we want to encourage them to part ways. Over here, he's dead anyway. Is someone the other way around? That Yochanan answered the kasha. Tanya Yeshla, the Bible says she's entitled to mazonos. Why would she give mazonos if he's supposed to get rid of her? He's supposed to divorce her. Why would we encourage him to give her mazonos that would encourage her to stay? But on the other hand, the Bryce says, Yeshla, she's entitled to. That's speaking lachamisa. But if he's not dead, we don't encourage him, and therefore, even though she's entitled to the ksuba, she's not entitled to mazonos. Again, like in the Yisurim in the Torah, again, chalus is going to be a problem. But in general, we're talking about the Yisurim in the Torah. To a kohen hedyo, she's entitled to ksuba. She's entitled to payros, right? If he ate her payros, he's entitled to them back. If it was some barzal or whatever, or if he divorced her, he's got to pay her mizonos, belos, all the stuff that he ate up or he consumed of her assets. She's entitled to everything because it's a measure of Torah. He psula, she is psul. Why does that mean? Kohen marries a grusha, he's turned her into a halal. In case of a Almana Kohen Gadol, he's turned her into a halal, right? Because an Almana could marry a Kohen, but if it's an Almana Kohen Gadol, which was a forbidden marriage, he's also turned her now into a halala. Okay, a grusha anyway can't marry a Kohen, but she's puzzled to marry a Kohen. With a lot of puzzle, her child is also a halal or a halala, boy or girl, and therefore the child is puzzled. And because of that, we'll see, because they're puzzled anyway, that's enough to discourage them from getting married. Now, the rabbis didn't put on an additional injunction saying you're not going to get the ksuba anymore. Since Torah they're married, she gets the ksuba. There's enough reason not to stay married because she's going to turn her kids into, every child that she has is going to be a halal. Go for us, we force him to divorce her. Shnias, since shnias only is from self, again, like marrying your mother's mother, your grandmother, or marrying your son's daughter-in-law, other shnias, since on Yasser, she's not entitled to ksuba lo peiros lamzos. So you might say this seems strange. When they're over in Issa Torah, she gets the ksuba and everything. When she's over in Issa Rabbanan, she doesn't get. Why? We'll explain why. The Shera, she's not a zone. It's not. She wasn't over in Issa Torah. She's only over in Issa Rabbanan. So she's not a halal or a zona. But Vlada kosher, her child is not a halal. The government said, well, we forced him to get rid of him because she's over on a Rabbanan of marrying your grandmother. Amram Shimon Lazar. What's the reason for this? Why do we say Almana has a ksuba? Why should she get a ksuba? She was over Nisr. Neshu puzzle be psula. She's puzzled because he turned her in a halala. Now, is he puzzled? Is he puzzled, this coin? He's not puzzled himself. He doesn't become a halala. She is halal, but puzzled. When the Gemara over here, she is puzzled. Rashi explains that he is puzzled. Rather, it means that we don't allow him to do avod in the Beis Mikdash until he forswears and says, I'm getting rid of her. I'm not going to marry her, anybody like that. He's puzzled to do avoda. That's the rabbis added that on. Minatori is not puzzled. But again, since he's puzzled in this way at least, and she's psula, and komakim shu puzzled, he psula, says Reb Shimon Elazar. This is Reb Shimon Elazar explains. Whenever he's puzzled and she's psula, that's enough of a discouragement, meaning that they'll part ways and kansu oso ksuba. In other words, the rules of the ksuba stay. Kansu means we fine him. We don't fine her. We don't cause her to lose the ksuba. We employ the regular rule that he has to give her the ksuba. Why? Because it's enough that since they're puzzled, since he's puzzled and she's psula, that's enough of a discouragement that they should leave the marriage without having him to lose her ksuba. She's entitled to ksuba because they're married. Say, well, let's take away the ksuba, she should leave. It's enough that she's puzzled by living with him and she shouldn't consummate the marriage with him, and her children that she has afterwards are going to be. It's enough for them to leave the marriage, even if she's already a halala, but she doesn't want her children to be halal. Yeah.
Just a clarification. If the Kohen marries a grusha,
right?
Does he become a halal?
No. That's what I just said. She becomes halal. Well, she's already a grusha. She's already forbidden to marry a Kohen anyway. But let's say it's a Kohen Gadol marrying an almana, where an almana normally could marry a Kohen. She becomes a halala and she couldn't marry a regular Kohen afterwards. The Kohen Gadol marries an almana. She is forbidden. She becomes a halala, and the children become halalim. But he doesn't become halal. Right, there's no way to disqualify him, but the rabbis disqualify him from avoda as long as he stayed in the bad marriage. Correct. It's the coin. They say he can't do the avoda. It's like It's like, when somebody does something against the Torah and many shuls don't allow them to have an aliyah, like that kind of a thing. As long as you're going to do that, like people, guy says, listen, I'm a Chal Shabbos, but I like the singing in this shul anyway. They do have singing, right? So yeah, I like the singing here. Can I join? Well, one of the rules, shuls, every shul can make their own rules, and when I grew up in St. Louis, almost all the Orthodox shuls, the parking lots were packed on Shabbos, almost all of the Orthodox shuls. Everybody can have their own rules. Some of the Young Israel movement used to have a rule that you can't be an officer in any Young Israel unless you keep Shabbos, or a shul can have whatever rules they want. In my mind, an Orthodox shul should say you have to keep Torah mitzvahs, otherwise don't be a member here, go join some other shul. Anyway, that's what the rabbi said. If Cohen marries somebody he's not supposed to, shouldn't do the avoda, but he doesn't become apostle himself. He does tshuva, he can marry, he's still a Cohen. He's still a Cohen. Okay. Where do we have? We have the rabbis instituted that a Kohen who marries a grusha, right? It's minarabanan. It's halacha today that the Rachman said that if a Kohen marries a grusha, that he shouldn't duchen and shouldn't give an aliyah as a Kohen anymore. He loses, I renounce my Kohen. He renounces his Kohen effectively. And that's really what Orthodox shuls. However, it's not minat Torah. Minat Torah, that doesn't. It is a disqualification in our lives, yes, in things that are done. We don't give him Kohen anymore, and he shouldn't duchen. And we've had cases like that. There are many cases like that. That's the halacha, but it's all drabanan. It's not minat Torah. He doesn't become us. Okay. And we said here he becomes possible to do the avoda. So he can't duchen, things like that. On the top line on the days now. Why do we say the shivs don't have ksuba? Because they haven't lost anything. In other words, they haven't over any issue in the Torah. By him marrying his grandmother is only over an issue of abundance. So he's still a Kohen. He still can do the avoda, and she still can do. She's kosher to marry a Kohen because she hasn't done anything wrong in the Torah. We say, what? You're not going to get a ksuba now. That maybe that'll discourage you to stay away. We're not the Torah didn't discourage you from staying away by turning you into halala, right? So we have to discourage you some way. So we say, what? You might as well leave. You're not going to get any money at the end of this anyway. You're not going to get a ksuba. That's what Rav Shapiro says. Rabbi says a different reason. Hello, the Divrei Torah in Sechemim. Allah coin God, the coin. The idea that this is from the Torah. This in Torah doesn't need any strengthening. It's good enough. The Torah said that we don't have to add on any things like taking away the ksuba and the mazonos and things like that. Hello, Divrei Sofrim. Marrying a shnia, marrying your grandmother is only an Isser Drabanan, and Divrei Sofrim, words from the rabbinic laws, they need strengthening, and therefore the rabbi said, take away her ksuba. Davar acher, listen to this carefully. Another reason. Zehu magila, v'zuki magila. So, in one case, she induces him. Rather, zehu magila. In this case, he induces her. Meaning, if she knows that she's going to come a halala and her children are going to be halalim, she's not happy about that. So why would she marry him? Because he entices her to get married. So in that case, we say, you know what, you still have to pay the ksuba because you're a bad boy because you're encouraging her. But in the case where let's say where shnias, where they're both kosher, so why should this grandmother want to marry her grandson? Because she wants to be married. She's not going to lose anything anyway. She's not going to become a halala. So she's encouraging him, and therefore we discourage her by taking away her ksuba. Who said that davar acher? Was it the first shita? Was it Shimon Elazar who get this business about where they're all both kosher? We make him pay the ksuba, and when they're both not kosher, when they both become puzzle, we take away the ksuba, right? When they're both kosher, we give them ksuba. Where they're not disqualified, where they're both kosher, we take away the ksuba. Was it Shimon Elazar or was it Rebbe? The one's Torah, one's Rabban. So we'll see. Again, some say it was Shimon Elazar. What's the reason? Why did Shimon Elazar say that when he's puzzle and she's puzzle, we make him pay the ksuba? When they're not matam puzzle be so we make him pay the ksuba. Meishu Magila, because he's the one who's inducing her to get married, because she said she should marry somebody else. She doesn't want her kids to become halalim, and she becomes a halala. It's a taint. It's a bad reputation. You can't marry her. She can't marry a Kohen. So who's causing the marriage? Who's inducing the marriage? Probably he is. He's encouraging her to get married. So therefore we say it's his fault. Make him pay the ksuba. Umatam hu kosher v'ksher. But if they're kosher and not kosher, if they're both kosher, in case when you marry your grandmother, that you haven't done any yisum in the Torah. So we take away because again, normally a woman wants to get married. Normally, a woman wants to get married. It was more of a taint of a bad thing for a woman to be alone. Those days she couldn't earn a living, etc. So it was difficult for a woman to be alone. A woman wants to be married more than a man, so we assume that she encouraged the marriage over here, and therefore we take away. Some say Rebbe Tanila, that it was Rebbe who said this in the Rice and Rabbanan. Here's what Rebbe said: look, if it's men Torah, Torah doesn't need chizuk, you can give her the ksuba. Doesn't need any strength in it. He said Rabbanan need chizuk, so he added an additional prohibition and said, you know what, she doesn't have the ksuba, an additional fine that she's not going to get a ksuba because it's only an issue Rabbanan. We need strengthening. But Rebbe says the chalutza is a problem. Chalutza is only Rabbanan, and still she gets the ksuba. We said Grusha chalutza gets the ksuba. Chalutza is only Rabbanan. According to his father, there's only Rabbanan. She should not get the ksuba because since it's only Rabbanan, it needs more strengthening. I'll tell you what it is. Kivin the apostle law. Since he takes it by marrying her, he caused her to lose a truma rabbanan. Zehu magila, right? He's causing her to get married because she doesn't want to get married because she's going to not be truma now. So why is she marrying this? Why is the Kohen marrying this chalusa? Because he's inducing her, he's encouraging her to get married. So therefore, we take away. Therefore, since he's doing it, we make him pay the ksuba like a grusha marrying Kohen. So in a case where it's only a drabanan, a regular drabanan, where there's no psul involved, nothing happens, there's no psul involved, then we take away ksuba. Ma'ikabein Rebbe Rav Shimon, what's it machnina with reason it's dreiser drabanan like Rebbe Rav Shimon was reason apostle and apostle. Here's the difference. If you say the reason is daraisa, this is also daraisa. The Isra Mamzeris and the scene of marrying Israel, not supposed to marry Israel. That's a daraisa, so she would get the ksuba. No, right? According to Rebbe, that's daraisa. She get the ksuba. Doesn't need strength. If the reason is because he causing her to get married, when she's a Mamzeris, she's the one who wants to marry him, right? Right? She Mamzeris feels outcast and she wants to marry him, as we said, because she figured, even though her kids are going to be Mamzerim also, the mother's Mamzeris, but as we see, what Tarfon says is away from Mamzer being tired by marrying a Shifra, and the kid is an Eved, and then you can free him and he can get out of the Mamzeris. So therefore, she's the one who's encouraging him to get married. So if the reason is because who's inducing who to get married, then since she's inducing the marriage over here, we take away the ksuba. So that would be an achmina. A Mamzeris or an Sina marrying Yisrael. If the reason is daraisa or drabanan, well, it's an issur daraisa, so therefore you'd have to give the ksuba. If the reason is because she's inducing the marriage over here, she's encouraging the marriage, since she's causing it because she wants to marry Yisrael and at least have a child who she can be metaher, therefore we take away her ksuba according to Rav Shimon Elazar. Says more Rav Elazar to Omar Harei Zeved Mamzer. That's not going to help her. The kid's always going to be not only an Eved. By marrying her kid is a mamzer marrying a shifra, and therefore her grandchild will be a eved who can be freed and be a regular Jew or marry regular Jews. Not going to help because the kid's a mamzer also. So she's not going to encourage the marriage, not going to help her anyway. Because she's still going to be, her family's still going to be mamzer, and all she's going to do is cause fights with her husband because now she's going to cause his kids to be a mamzer. So she's not the one who induces it. Elam Rabbi Yosef, we're looking for a different masak v'shasa mishanissa. Speaking now. The Bach takes out Mishanissus, but Rashi keeps it anyway, because that's the issue we're talking about. Masigushoso Mishanissus, if she marries somebody else in between, take her back. Mandam Daraisa, since it's an issue Daraisa, Anami Daraisa, and therefore she's gets the ksuba. Umandam, the reason is, Rav Shimon Elazar says the reason is because if he encourages the marriage, this forbidden marriage, he has to pay the ksuba. He margulate. She is the one who's encouraging the marriage over here because she wants to marry him more than he wants to marry her. According to Rabbi Kiva holds that this also would make a mamzer, so she doesn't want to have mamzerim over here, so she doesn't encourage this marriage for a meeting. So again, what would be what's the case of a nafmi between Rebbe and Shmuel and Rav Papa Ba'ula Kohen Gadol now, where she's a Ba'ula, meaning Kohen Gadol, she's not an almana, but she's not a virgin anymore. So what's the issue over there? Kim Ba'ula Ba'am Vikachisha is only an issue asay. It's not an issue la. So in a case like Madam, if the issue is Daraisa and Ami Daraisa, she's entitled to the ksuba. According to Rebbe, is it Daraisa Rabban? Daraisa, she gets the ksuba. She doesn't. This is a deraisa. Because he's encouraging her. She is the one who's encouraging over here because the kids are not going to be ruined anymore, right? Says psula. Below Bu'ula, V'lav B'machas Essay, V'lav the Zona Leka, Hachat the Ein Zona on Nivas Bia Isura. So she's not a Zona, it's only an Isur Asay. And therefore, she is not, nobody's getting ruined over here. She's going to encouraging it more. And if she encourages it, we take away her ksuba. So again, if you hold like Rebbe, she would get the ksuba, Bula Kohen Gadol, because it's forbidden in the Torah. But if you say the reason is because of becoming puzzle, therefore, she would be where they become puzzle. She would be the one who is encouraging it, and therefore she would lose the ksuba. Well, the Rav Meir Yaakov says no. This is also a case of a halal. Even though she's not an almana, she's not a grusha, she's simply not a virgin anymore. That's a halal too. The coin's not supposed to marry her. There's even a halal from Hayesed. Before we assume that only a halal is from a losa, say you shouldn't marry grusha, shouldn't marry an almana if he's a kohen gadol. But from an asay, simply that she's not a virgin, that would not make a chobra. That's a halal also. So therefore, she wouldn't encourage marriage. Hello, Margale. Hello, Midi. Elo Marvashi Master Suffolk Sota. If he's a Suffolk Sota, what does that mean? A regular Sota is a Suffolk, meaning he warned her not to have seclusion with a certain guy. And then after she had seclusion with that guy, they were aiding to that. So now it's a Suffolk. She's a possible adulteress or not. The Pasuk says, if she's not supposed to sleep anymore with the husband or with the Baal, right? This is an Isser Daraisa. That's the Sota. When we talk about Sota, we're talking about a Suffolk Sota is the Sota in Isser in the Torah. So she's entitled to Mandam Neshu Magila, Ahimagale. She is the one who's encouraging it back. She wants to marry him because kids don't become puzzle. So she's the one who's encouraging it, therefore she should lose the Ksuba. Ular Masi ben Chorish to Omar Afilu Halach Balashkoso, Barla Badera Asazana. Masi Masha holds that even if he's on the way to the base of Migdash to give her to drink the May Marim, and he lives with her, that's also turns her into a zona. So then she becomes puzzle to a kohen. So she wouldn't encourage Vlamidi. So again, Elam Ravashi Sota Vade Ikibinayo. What does that mean? Aisha's issues in. So we know that she committed adultery. Or Adam, she committed adultery. So in that case, Midaraisa, Spasa Mashmal Spasa Asura. So what? She's also to marry. It's also in a Torah to marry to stay married to her husband. Therefore, it's in the Torah, she's still entitled to her ksuba. Aisha's issues in. So the Sil Midaraisa. Spasa Mashmal says Bloransa Asura. So the answer is it's still there's no mamzer from there. But again, so in this case, she encourages him to get married, and therefore she would lose the ksuba. But since if you hold that the reason is who's doing the encouragement, who's the one who we're trying to keep from encouraging the marriage. So since she encourages the marriage, we take away her ksuba. But if you hold it's the raisa, you don't take a ksuba, only in Isser Rabbar we take ksuba. This is an Isser Daraisa, and therefore she wouldn't tell the ksuba. There would be a nafkamina between Rebbe and Rav Shimon Elazar. Says the Mishnah, Bas Yisrael who rests the coin. Bas Yisrael who's engaged to a coin. She's engaged to a coin. She's entitled to eat truma. Min Torah she can eat truma, but Rabbi said don't eat truma because we're afraid she's going to give it to her family, right? So if she's engaged to a coin, or Mumberskan, let's say her husband died. She was married to a coin and she got pregnant from him and he died. So can she eat truma? No. Shemer Siyam coin, or her husband died. She's waiting to marry her brother Shimon, is also a coin. All these people cannot eat truma because, as we said before, Uber and Yavam Erison post when they pass up eat truma, but they don't cause her eat truma. Came Bas Kohen to Yisrael. She's a Bas Kohen who ate truma in her father's house, and she's engaged to Yisrael. Lo tachol b'truma. It forbids. In other words, engagement passes her from eating truma. It doesn't give her truma. Bas Yisrael Meres. Let's say she's engaged to a Levi. Beres Levi. Shemes Yom Levi. Came Bas Levi Yisrael. Lo tachol Meiser. Came Meiser. You might say Meiser Levi. Meiser you're entitled to eat anyway. Anybody can eat Meiser. We'll talk about that. But we're assuming now that who can eat Meiser? Only a Bas Levi, right? But let's say the Bas Levi, she's Bas Yisrael engaged to a Levi, Beres Levi, Shemes Yom Levi, or Bas Levi engaged to Yisrael, Lo Tachol Meiser. Bas Levi Meres Lekoin, Beres Lekoin, Shemes Yom Lekoin. V'chein Bas Kohen Levi, Lo Tachol Lo B'Trum V'Lo Meiser. In other words, we're assuming now that a Levi is entitled to eat Meiser, nobody else. Cohen is entitled to eat Truma, nobody else. And if you're engaged to one of these, that if you're engaged, if you were entitled before, you're not entitled now. And if you're going to be entitled after the marriage, you're not entitled while you're engaged or while you're pregnant with this child. All that we'll see, we discussed before, but we'll see more of it in the Gemara. We'll pick up from here from Gemara tomorrow, Mr. Shem. The Gemara's going to ask right away, what do you mean? Anybody could eat. Anybody can eat mice. So we're going with the sheet that also that only a lady or a boss lady is entitled to eat mice. Chodesh Tov l'kulam.
So the word margala